Welcome back to Cylance TV. We are back in the cybersecurity corner, and buckle in because we have Malcolm Harkins, the Chief Security and Trust Officer for Cylance. Thank you for joining us. We are at RSA 2018, but I think that's kind of irrelevant. But you are the original Quotemeister, and you just said something that kind of melted my brain. I won't say it blew my hair off because everybody knows I didn't have any hair, but you shared some words of wisdom and inspiration from the greatest, from Muhammad Ali, that I think applies to everything. If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, thanks. And you know, I found this quote based upon being frustrated again with peers that just have given up and given in. They feel like they have to accept compromise, and certainly we believe that prevention is possible. And when Cylance was created, we set out to do the impossible, which was to prevent malicious code from executing. And this Muhammad Ali quote, for me, it just sums it up really well, I think, in terms of how we need to think about risk, how we need to approach it, and the mindset, you know, the security officers need to have when they try and go and address risk issues. Impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in a world they've been given rather than to explore the power they have to change it. Impossible is not a fact. Impossible is an opinion. Impossible is not a declaration. Impossible is a dare. Impossible is potential. Impossible is temporary. Impossible is nothing. When you think about that, you know, and I bring that back to accepting compromise, that's somebody who's given up on the possibility. They've given up on hope. I like that quote from Muhammad Ali because it says, you know what? I'm going to do my damn best to change the world that I live in rather than accept the risk that I have today.
Impossible is a dare. That's the nugget that I pull out of there that I'm going to keep. But it also reminds me of another champ who has a great line, not quite as verbose, Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And you know, so I think that's what you guys have been doing. What we've been doing with Cylance is not accepting impossible, not getting stuck in, well, this is the way it's been working. Man, we're not that great. But one of the great things, why I love working with you on different things, is that you seem genuinely offended by the fact that we as an industry have not stopped this. We get better, they get better. And it's this race that it doesn't feel like we're winning. So, you know, as you've evolved over the course of your career, seen different things, and now not just the Chief Security Officer, but the Security Trust Officer, how's that different? Where does trust come into this? I mean, we're securing the data, we're backing up the data, it should be fine, right?
Well, it is a trust problem fundamentally, right? At the end of the day, trust is a function of two things, competence and character. You know, and if you look at the industries and you break down the competency is supposed to deliver a result, an outcome. The industry has failed at that. So from that trust equation, by and large, the industry hasn't shown the competence to deal with the problem. And then when you get to character, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, the security industry by and large profits from the insecurity of computing. From an intent perspective at an economic level, the vast majority of the industry has no economic incentive to solve the problem. Competence, character.
So is the problem solvable as we look at this? I mean, is it impossible? I'm daring you at this point to say, from your perspective, with your experience and the things that you're working on, can we solve the problem? Not just we as Cylance, but we as all of us.
I think we can solve the problem, but let's just face it, like with technology, this is a journey with no finish line. Right? The same thing is going to be true for security. And risk is temporal, right? The decisions I make now, getting to the theme of the RSA conference, now matters. The decisions I make now affect risk a day from now, a week from now, a year from now, 20 years from now. The decisions the semiconductor industry made 20 years ago only came to be known with Meltdown Inspector just recently. Those were decisions that were made to just validate the functionality that they wanted to have in the products, and the architecture they wanted to have would only work as intended. Not that I could use that functionality for unintended purposes. That was a choice invalidated. I was asked a few weeks ago, what do I see my role as? And in many ways I said, I see my job as one of a choice architect. I'm architecting choices around decisions that have an effect on cost, have an effect on risk, have an effect on the user experience, right? And the speed with which a business can execute. And so Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but I do think with the right mindset, we can solve the problem and be in front of the problems. I've long said we've got to run to the risky things to shape the path of the risk, right? If the security team is saying, ooh, no, I don't like IoT, ooh, no, I'm worried about mobile, ooh, no, I'm worried about artificial intelligence, well, what does that mean? Technology evolution is not going to stop. And if the security team's not being the first adopter of the technology, they're not ideating, innovating, getting in front of the future risk issues to shape the path of the risk. You change the mindset and have those security teams run to the riskiest things first, they will actually better be able to determine how to secure it before the rest of the enterprise catches up to it.
Now, have you seen instances like that where in the industry, on the security side of things, when expand the definition of security if necessary, where someone has run to the risk and the whole notion of now matters, comparable to Spectre and Meltdown, they made a decision on a security issue that turned out to be the right one. And that we look back, it's like, wow, had we done what we were thinking about doing, it could have been horrible.
Yeah, I've got ones dated from my history back at Intel. I've written about them in my books. One of the ones that stands out the most, early days of mobile platform. Intel developed the Centrino platform, the first wireless laptop. And the mindset was, oh, this is really insecure, wireless access points, boy, we're really worried about it. And what ended up happening was rogue access points started popping up left and right, because you could go to the electronics store, buy a router, wireless for 50 bucks, plug it in, light up a few thousand square feet to build it. The IT organization was charging a business unit $50,000 to load it up, and then $10 a user a month. It was an economics problem. I was asked to go spend millions of dollars to go find the rogue access points everywhere. And my own team was a little bit hesitant about wireless from the security perspective. And I said, it's the wrong paradigm. I can do device authentication with wireless. And wireless is where it's going to go. So I took the money that I was supposed to use to deploy sniffer capability to look for rogue access points, and I helped enable ubiquitous wireless across the company. Why? Because it had better user productivity. I could do device authentication and lower my risk. And guess what? I actually got a different risk benefit because people were worried about the data protection element of it. But with the mobility that we got a business resiliency benefit. We had a building with a pipe break, wiped out a floor. Everybody had their laptop with them. Why? Because they used it mobily.
Yeah, you could just pick up and go.
And then they could work for a conference room wherever. We had resiliency because of the mobility. And the security team was looking at the data protection angle of it, not all aspects of the risk equation. And so because we ran to what was perceived to be risky, we actually had more security because I had device authentication. I got a risk benefit when it came to a business continuity disaster recovery perspective. And guess what? Users got a ton of productivity.
Well, it's back to what you were saying about giving them a choice. You made the choice based on everything you knew in addition to tools available, and it was the right one. It's not that it turned out to be the right one with all of the facts. That's the only choice that you could make. Now, I want to talk a little bit about trust and risk, again, where we look at big trends in the industry now. Obviously, machine learning and artificial intelligence, not just us, but some of the Me Too guys out there, but there's some actual ones that are doing things as well. It feels like we're trying to remove as much of the human element as we can, but we still have to trust. We have to have that faith, right? Had they not trusted you to make that decision to do... Cut that part. Had they not trusted you and allowed you to zig when they were asking you to zag, that pipe would have cost tens of thousands of dollars. What are we doing now where we are showing some faith? We're putting the trust in the people to do the right thing, but we're mitigating the risk as much as we can. So any choice they make is going to be right-ish, but it might be better to do this than that.
Well, I think there's a few ways to really break that down. In the broad sense, people are talking about artificial intelligence creating labor issues. We think broad industries, right? It's going to have an effect. We don't need this many people, and that type of stuff. I think when you look at it in the security paradigm, whatever study you look at, there's millions of shortages of security folks. Now, by and large, that's because the preventative controls have failed, and we've had to swing to reaction, which means you need to throw bodies at it. And I think what we're starting to see now, and we see it with our customers, right, that the AI prevention stops the malicious code executing. Their environment quiets down. Their need for additional labor to go do reactive stuff diminishes, and it enhances the job of the SOC analyst. And I think where you're starting to see the kind of reinvention of security orchestration, security automation, what hunting can be with AI and ML assist, it becomes an augmentation to the SOC analyst. It doesn't remove them from decision making. It basically aids them in covering more ground. Again, growing up in a manufacturing environment, manufacturing, in order to make as much money as possible at the lowest total cost, you want yield. I want more output at the same fixed cost. We've got to have a yield mentality when it comes to security. How do I get yield out of my bodies in the SOC? How do I get yield out of my decision makers? How do I get yield out of the control to stop things? And again, when you take an economics view of it and you go, it's a yield issue. And right now, by and large, the industry has not gotten yield out of the security investments because they don't work. And what we've done is added layers and layers of economically inefficient processes to make up for the lack of yield. Better prevention, you got huge yield on that endpoint for stopping things. AI and ML assisted detection and response, you get yield out of the bodies you've got. It's like putting on an exoskeleton, right? The strength that they're going to have to do things and cover more things is going to be there. And so that's, for me, where I think it can go. And if we think of it that way, the transformative effect of it, when you think 5-10 years down the road, can be enormous. And I would love to see that, and I think we're already seeing it to some extent with our customers, is that they have seen a bend in the curve of risk, which then allows them to truly lower, flatten that total cost of controls.
So when you were talking about 5-10 years down the road, as we see all the scandals is a harsh word, whether it's with Facebook, with, why am I dying on this? Analytica.
Cyber Cambridge
Analytica. So to your point about looking 5 to 10 years down the road, looking at the data that's out there now, whether it's what's happening with Facebook, with Cambridge Analytica, there's so much data. But how can we trust that it's legit? We're securing it and we're protecting it, but we're looking at the future. Now matters, but so does next. And what are we doing as a people philosophically to address this? It's just been dropped on us, in the last couple of weeks. But now they're looking to us. They're looking to you, security and trust officer. What can we do?
It's a great question, and there might not be an easy answer by and large. I mean, even with the whole election, did Russia do this? Did they not do that? Was Facebook manipulated? The other social media stuff? Information warfare and manipulating data for the purposes of causing an individual to think a certain way or make a certain decision. I mean, heck, you could say that's the advertising university, right? And so we've been using information manipulation to change opinions. I mean, heck, since probably the printing press. And so it's just happening in an aggregate digitized form now. And then when you think back to some of the challenges on that, yeah, that's a trust issue. And you have to think about what your social responsibilities are with respect to that. I've long believed that information risk is a corporate social responsibility, just like privacy is in security. And I think organizations and chief information security officers need to step up into becoming the chief information risk officer, the chief trust officer, because foundationally, if you can't trust the data and I can't trust the system, then you're walking on a house of cards.
So you've got a lot of years left on this earth, which means there's going to be...
I hope so.
Yeah, exactly. Whoops, yeah, don't ever say that out loud. You look to the near-term and mid-term future. data is going to drive more and more of what we do. And we're going to see more AI and machine learning driven things that are coming into our daily lives. If it's self-driven cars, recommendations from Amazon, whatever. Are we moving in the right direction? Are you hopeful for as things are going and how this is influencing our lives?
I'm a hopeful person by and large, but I'm also practical. I think it can head in the right direction, but there's a bunch of slippery slopes that are in front of us when you, again, get into architecting the choices. A lot of people, and the data is certainly driving a lot of things, which is great. But at the same time, again, I'll look at the security industry. The security industry wants more and more and more and more and more data. Now, what's it collecting more and more data on, and is it using it for the right purposes? Well, you know, the detection and response side of the world, I need to bulk collect all this machine data, shove it in the cloud, do a bunch of reactive data analytics to do things. Well, I just degraded the privacy, perhaps, of that end user. Now, a lot of people say it's just machine data. Well, machine data can be personal information.
Sure, you've got a digital footprint on there. Your habits are established.
Right.
Even if it's how hard you strike the keys, it's all there.
Right, so you have to look at, is your security solution, because it's siphoning up so much information and how it's using it, is it increasing your privacy risk? You know, in some cases it is. That needs to be evaluated. The other aspect of it just becomes one of, again, with the re-architecture, you look at how our product works. We don't have to do that because we're that pre-execution capability that the efficacy of control is not required to be cloud connected. We don't need that chattiness. So we've got almost a data minimization architecture on the one hand to actually achieve our effectiveness. Or the way in which we've done the work, the result is data minimization because we don't need all of that data. So there's different ways in which I think we've got to think through this and think through what it might mean and how we're going to have potential issues 5 or 10 years down the road. Again, you bring up the Facebook thing. Terms and conditions were out there. Users probably didn't read all of that and probably didn't understand it. But years later then, there's an issue when they, in essence, let themselves be the product for a free service. And so we have to, I think, again, contemplate those things and make sure we explain to individuals in a transparent fashion what data we're collecting about them, how we're using that, what our future uses of that are. You've seen internally, we have a set of privacy principles. And those privacy principles become that almost moral compass around our approach to data, particularly when it gets into personal information. And that will keep us on a consistent path, and those will have staying power for years. And so, you know, for organizations that don't have a set of privacy principles or social responsibility principles that embed security and privacy into them, I'd encourage them to do that. And I think that will help alleviate the slippery slopes, because it'll point that North Star moral compass what our long-term intent is.
I love the notion of applying morality to data. As you know, first it was just collecting data. Then we wanted to collect the metadata. And then the NSA said, "Wow, we didn't read any of that stuff. It was only the metadata that we looked at." And now we've got the data about the data about the data. At what point is it just we're just collecting data because we can? We've got enough spinning disks, we're throwing it on there, you know. But then you've got all this stuff. How do you morally look at that? Because somebody's going to create the forensic tool that's always going to be identify that one person, even if you're 12 steps of data removed from where they are. Are we ever going to get? Is it going to get that bad, or is that just my tinfoil hat?
No, I think you could argue in some cases it's already that bad. Now, again, this is where I had a debate yesterday in the Tech Target discussion on the panel. You know, again, the market that says that the security team needs visibility, and we need visibility with all of this data so we can do attribution. That's, again, one of my pet peeves. Attribution to what? People go, well, threat actor and threat agent. It's like, I've run security for a long time at risk. I have no control over the threat actor and threat agent. No ability. It's interesting because it gives me some information, but the attribution I want, and the attribution we should be focused on, that we can know with 100% certainty, is what control failed. That's the attribution we should be focused on. That's the visibility we should be focused on. That's the data we should be collecting. Because as a security person in an organization and a risk professional, that's the only thing I control, is how vulnerable I am. And sometimes the whole collecting more data and giving you more visibility ends up redirecting you towards something that you can't actually affect.
Yeah. So shameless plug time. You got a lot of stuff going on. You're writing, you do podcasts, all kinds of different things. If people are looking for you and your latest activities, where do we go?
You can find me on Cylance.com, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can follow me on Twitter at Protect2Enable.
Follow that one, because that one's really good. And for all the other good stuff, you can always get us at Cylance.com. On Twitter, we are at Cylance Inc. and at Cylance Insider, and I am at PacMat73. I always go to find learned gentlemen such as Malcolm who bring Muhammad Ali to the party. So come on.